Uh, okay, we have looked at different instructions in this file. We have also looked at the format of them. And then now we'll start implementing the data path. So we look at each instruction and design data path for that. Okay, once we complete data path design, then you can understand how actually a processor works. Okay, so this part is going to be very interesting. Okay, so today we'll look at some components which I am sure you would have studied in your digital electronics course, but we'll revise it because it's very important, right? So these are the basic concepts that we'll use in the processor design. Okay, you can see this slide which shows the computer system design hierarchy.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. So basically, when we have to design a system, in general, a processor, we will have to look at two parts, right? First is data part design, where the actually data moves, right, from memory to registers to CPU or ALU and so on, right? And second part is control. The control path controls the data path. Okay. All right. And the components within that are, in control part, some very important is a combination logic. The one which generates control signal. For example, movement of data from say memory to register and so on. Okay. For example, we can have, you can see in data path also we are registered. Okay. So for example, we have 32 general purpose registers, and then we have instruction register, we have program counter, which is also a register, and so on. So registers are there for storage of state and as well as storage of code. Okay, you bring instruction, essentially you bring the code. Okay, and then apart from that, we have multiplexers, comparators, and ALU, arithmetic logic unit, which is essentially a combination logic. Okay, so we'll look at all that, and then we have logic circuits, which is essentially combination logic circuits, and then primary registers. So this is kind of breakup, and then we have something to interconnect this, right? Interconnect registers, ALU, memory, and so on. Okay. Right now we are talking about the processor, so we are not talking about memory in this one. What we are going to design is something that is inside a processor. All right, is it clear? Okay, so I'm sure you would have done this in your previous course. Okay, and I'm sure that you know difference between synchronous and asynchronous circuits, right? So synchronous circuits basically consists of two types of circuits or lower level circuits. First is combinational circuit and second is sequential circuit. And I'm sure that again you know what is combinational circuit, which is nothing but all kinds of gates interconnected with each other. Okay, like AND gate, OR gate, NAND, NOR, etc. And one important property is that output is function of input only. Okay, so suppose this is a combinational circuit block, and these are the inputs, and these are the outputs. Whatever is the input at that instant of time, output depends on that. Okay, so it means that it does not have even past history. Whatever you have done previously doesn't matter. Whatever is input, that produces output. Okay. Say for example, something that we are building to add two registers, say register A and B. Output depends only on A and B. It doesn't depend on previous values. Okay, and wherein in case of sequential logic, it remembers what has happened in the past. Okay, that's the reason we call them state element, which can store the state of the system. Okay, So the discrete elements are in general two, memories and registers. Okay. So now in this class and the next class also we'll focus on registers, and memory will do it after say 7 or 8 classes. Okay. Now we are moving to circuits that can store information, right? Essentially registers. So for that we and registers are nothing but a kind of sequential logic circuit, right? So first let's look at what is combinational logic circuit. The output, as we discussed earlier, the output depends only on the inputs at that point in time. Okay. So essentially whatever be the input, that will produce an output. Okay. And now next, after some time, whatever is another set of input, that will produce the output corresponding to the second set of input. It means that, and that second set could be related to first set, but it's but the circuit here does not store any information about previous states or previous inputs, right? So we can say output is simple function of input at that point in time. It's very simple, right? Okay. Okay. If we want to produce a circuit that can give output depending on the current and the past inputs. Now remember, the past inputs could be a history, right? It could be past, and up to from where it started, right? So that's the reason we need a memory. Okay. So now we have so there's a combinational circuit that's part of the whole design, and then part of that or some output we take, and that we can store in a storage element. Okay, and that becomes input to again combinational logic. Along with new set of input, it again produces output, and we again store some information out of the output in the storage element. Okay, so sequential circuits give us sequence of events and use feedback, right? So now we are going to use state elements, and before that we'll define what state elements are. Okay, so state elements for us, which is important, which will be used in our processors or registers. Okay, and memory which is also important. We'll study memory hierarchy later, which includes caches, main memory, and secondary memory, and so on. Okay. So these state elements help control flow of information between combination logic blocks. So you know that combination logic block is nothing but gates connected in some way. Okay, when you would have seen corresponding to an output, you create a network of combinational circuit or gate, different kind of gates. Okay, now note that information flow is very fast from one end to another end. Okay, and there is not much control that happens, right? Let's assume that there's a block of combinational circuits and the second block of combinational circuits, and then you want to use both. Then it is extremely difficult to do only combination circuit design, because timing issues can go totally wrong. Because you may want certain inputs to be available when certain other conditions are met, and that is extremely difficult. That's the reason we use registers or sequential logic or storage element to control the flow of movement or control the movement of information from input to output among various combination logic blocks. Okay, so there are multiple combination logic blocks, and they are doing useful things. And then, in order to order in order to create right order in the movement of information, we need sequential logic. All right, and okay. And some of the sequential logic circuits that you have studied in your course is bistable circuit. Bistable is essentially it has only two states, right? Then you would have studied latches, which is RS type and D type, and D type flip-flop. Okay, so we'll start with very simple RS latch, and we'll not spend too much time on it because I'm sure you would have studied in detail. But remember that latch is not a flip-flop. Okay. Okay, this flip-flop or D-type flip-flop that we are going to use in register is more than a latch. Okay, so simple RS latch is set reset type. It consists of two NAND gates and two inputs and two outputs. Now note that, and rather remember that output Q and Q dash, they can never be same if this is, and Q dash is nothing but is opposite of what Q is, or Q prime. Okay, so it's a 1, then this will be 0. If this is 0, it's going to be 1. So this is a basic property, right? So now we can use different values of S and R. Okay, and then we can get desirable output, right? For example, let's assume that Q contains, say, logic 1, or Q gives output as 1. Okay, and then if we keep S and R at 1, okay, then Q, that next value will be same as Q. So if Q is 1, the output will be 1. Okay, so if you both put S and R as 1, then whatever is previous state remains in the latch. So it means that it can now work as a memory. Okay. Now if you set S to 0 instead of 1, okay, then output Q changes to 1. All right. So this way, you can change the value of register, and at the same time you can retain the value by giving proper inputs. Okay. However, if both are 0, then there is a problem, right? So it's an invalid state. If R and S both are 0, then it gives invalid state. Okay, and you can see that because if you put both as 0, if this is 0, this one are also 0, so both will be 1. Now this contradicts the condition, right? Q and Q bar. Okay, so that's not desirable condition. So we should never be in this state, and this is not. Now what happens if system goes into this state? Then the output will not be stable, right? So let's avoid that. Okay, and there is other problem is that when both are at 0 and then you switch it to 1, right? Let's assume both are at 0, then obviously if this is 0, then output will be 1. So this will become 1 here. Similarly, this one comes here, and then now you change this S to 1, then you can easily see that system will oscillate between 1 and 0. Okay, so this state is called metastable state. Okay, you can work this out because both S and R have to change at the same time for system to oscillate or to be in metastable state. All right, any question up to this point? Anyone, please? Aditi, your name comes first in the list, so you tell me.
Yes, sir.
Yes means what? Is it clear or
clear to me? Yeah, it's clear.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, all right. So we'll not go into this. Now we solve this problem of metastable state and invalid state by having gated D. You would have studied this also, right? And we'll make sure that it's never 0, 0. And the very simple thing is that take one input only, because you don't need two for latches or for flip-flop, and take this value and invert this, like here using NOT, So if this is 1, then this will become 0. So both will never be 0, right? So all right, so in this way we can avoid this problem, right? And then we have something called write enable. Okay, when this is 0, so we'll come to next state. When this is 0, when write enable is 0, then output is same as the previous state, right? I mean, if it is 0, the output is 0. If this is 1, then output is 1. Okay, so whatever be value of D, okay, when W or write enable is 0, whatever be value of, whatever is the value of D, okay, whether 0 or 1, the previous state remains. I said it wrongly. Okay, so it means that if this is 0, Q is 0, okay, previous state is 0, and write enable is 0, then whatever be the value of D, let's assume D is 1 or 0, it doesn't matter really. Then output remains what it was earlier, which is 0. Okay, it means the state does not change whatever be the value of input if write enable is 0. If write enable is 1, then whatever is at input goes to output. Okay, so when write enable is 1 here, so whatever is input, whether 0 or 1, that goes to output. So this is simple, right? Any question on this one? You would have done this in your course, right? Aditi again.
Yes, sir, we have done this one.
Okay, all right. So let's move faster then. And note that there is no clock here, right? So now let's come to the concept of clock. Okay, if we don't have clock, okay, and we have combination sequential logic circuits, it's very difficult to synchronize between them, right? Because ultimately a microprocessor has to give output corresponding to various functions that are involved or that are designed using combination logic and sequential logic circuits, right? And each one requires input at certain time, takes certain time to process that input, and produce that output at certain point in time. Okay, and all these operations of individual even gate level needs to be synchronized for proper output to happen. Otherwise, it's when there are millions of gates, it's impossible, to get right output out of all these combinations and permutations, etc. Okay, at right time. Okay, so something that we need is clock, and then clock tells every circuit when to accept input, how much time they have to execute the logic, and when they can produce output. Okay, and so it's something like this, right? I mean, you know all about clock. So this is a clock, and what we have here is a cycle time. Okay, now within this cycle time, certain operation has to happen. All right. Okay, so I will not go into much detail. And you know that so very simple design of processor is when within one cycle, that is from here up to this point, we can execute one instruction. So this is simplest design we will actually study after set 2 classes. Okay. All right. So now, of course, I mean, we will also discuss that what should be the clock speed in order for an instruction to execute fully, right? So we know that, this frequency is nothing but 1 by cycle time. So if you increase the frequency, cycle time reduces, and vice versa. Okay. This is very simple that CPU, if CPU has 2.5 gigahertz, then the cycle time is 400 picosecond, wherein a drum or heartbeat has cycle time of 1 second. Okay. All right. Now, so now we use clock to tell circuits, essentially a state circuit or registers or flip-flop when to change state. Okay. So in the course that we are going to follow, or the topics that we are going to study, will define that state change will happen only when there is a transition from 0 to 1 or at the edge. Okay, it's a leading edge, okay, or rising edge. Okay, so at the start of clock cycle, system state changes. Now there is a possibility that you can design a system where the state changes happen not at the clock edge, but also during the level, right? So for example, now we are assuming that change is happening here. Instead of that, we can also design a circuit where change happens here. Okay, but we, the designers, processor designers, have taken this design aspect that only at the leading edge of the clock, state changes will happen, and this is called edge triggered clocking. Okay, we are not doing level triggered clocking henceforth. Okay, all right. So it could be rising edge or falling edge. So either we can take this one or this one where state changes can happen. However, in our design, we are taking only the first one, the rising edge. Okay, it's all right. So this we have already discussed in some sense that clock is required primarily to trigger transition from one state to another state. That's the first function. It synchronizes state changes across many sequential circuits. Second function. And the combination logic evaluates the length of the. So if the length of the clock, this is the one cycle time. The state change has happened here, and whatever time is available in this period, the combinational circuit must do its job. Okay, and whether combinational circuit can do its job depends on the length, right, or the period. Okay, if because combinational circuit also has some delays. Okay, and there, you would have studied the longest path a combinational circuit can have. That will determine the overall delay. Now, if your combinational circuit critical path is just too long, right, and which cannot be accommodated in this period, then the whole design will not work, right? So this point says that combination logic evaluates the length of the clock. Okay, this means that within the clock cycle, combination circuit which is attached to a sequential circuit must finish its job. Okay, the next point is same, that it must accommodate the maximum combination circuit delay. Okay, and last point is that the clock edge acts as a sampling signal, causing the value of the data input to a state to be sampled and stored in the state, right? So this point we'll see. So at the leading edge, whatever is the input, that is taken as actual input available, right? So, all right. So the same point is emphasized here. We have a state element, which is let's assume a flip-flop. Only at the rising edge, this state changes depending on the input it has, and then it remains stable. Output remains stable up to this point. Okay, and in this period, this combinational circuit should do its job, and output should be available to next state circuit. Okay, and then whatever is the value output at this rising edge should be taken in this state element, second state element. All right, any question? Any question? No? Shall we move ahead? Okay, all right. So this, I'm sure you would have done this. Then let's look at what is FF, finite state machine. And I'm sure you would have also done, because without FSM, you cannot design sequential circuit, right? So it's discrete time model of stateful system. Okay. And each state represents snapshot of system at a given time. Okay. And FSM pictorially represent different states, right? So we can define different states, and we can define the transition between them. And this state is finite number. Okay. So we can define the state based on certain inputs, and it can also give certain output. You would have studied Moore and Mealy machines, right? So, all right. So we are okay. We'll look at in the next class, possibly, if time permits, design of FSM, but I will not go into detail. Okay, so the FSM required state, and in FSM, we have finite number of states, right? Okay, and each state gives snapshot of all relevant elements of system at the time of snapshot. For example, in our case, in the case of processor, what could be state of the processor? What can define state of a processor? Anyone?
So the instruction that it's executing.
Yeah, but that if I say I have to store that state and restart after some time, the instruction will not. Instruction will cause state change, execution of instruction, right? But what if I'm going to define a state now?
So the value in the registers?
Absolutely right. So value of registers. So there are different registers, right? That will define a state. What else? Something you would have stored in memory, right? We have studied stack, heap, and some variables we couldn't store into registers, so we will have them into stack. So memory also defines, where state elements can be there. Memory is also a state element. Program counter, right, is also another state element. Okay, all right. Okay, so if you store all these values, then you can restore the state, right? When we jump from one process to another process, okay, what we try to do by storing the return value and some registers that need to be stored, we are trying to store the state of the processor, and when we come back from the process or function to which we have jumped, we can restore the state. Okay. Another important point here is that it has finite number of external inputs. Okay, something that's coming to the FSM, and certain number of external outputs, and then we have to define how state changes happen. Okay, from one state to another state. So, for example, in case of processor, state change happen because of execution of next instruction. Okay, so every instruction execution changes the state of the machine, the FSM. All right. Okay. So state transition, how do we actually transition from one state to another state needs to be defined. And the last point is that we'll have to also explicitly specify what determines the actual state, external state value. Okay, what is the actual output? All right, so it's something like this. This diagram you would have studied several times. So we have a next state logic here, which is nothing but a combinational circuit. Okay, and then there is a sequential circuit here. So next state logic will determine what is the output. okay, depending on the present input and the previous state, right? The previous state is actually a function of its own previous states. Okay, so these two inputs will determine the next state, which goes into a state element, which is a register. Okay, and based on this states, and then again we have a combinational logic circuit which can give the output. All right, so this is how we design a processor. Okay, all right. So this is what in the this slide is something that we have already discussed. Okay, the FSM consists of sequential circuits, combinational circuits, and output logic. Simple. Okay, so now we come back to where we have stopped. Okay, so we have studied the latch, okay, and master-slave combination of the latch. Now, in this 5 minutes, we'll see that why latches are not useful. Okay. All right. So, all right. Before that, okay, I'm sorry. Before that, let's go into state register implementation. Okay. So, a state register, when we are going to design, we need 2 properties. First is that we need to store data at the beginning of the clock cycle. Okay. So there's a sequence, there is a register, and there's an input that comes from combinational circuit. Okay. Only at the edge of the clock, whatever be the input here, that will be get into the state element. That's all it says, right? So, and then the data is available during entire clock cycle. So once this transition has happened in register, the output of that will be valid for rest of the clock period. Rest of the clock period is up to this point, when the next trigger can happen. All right. So it's like this. Okay, this is the clock. Okay, this is the input register value. Okay. Now, whatever be the value that comes from say combinational circuit, we look at this edge. Okay, and that output will ideal output at that point, and let's assume that there is a 0 delay for sequential for register. Then that output will be valid, should be available up to what? Next. So now this is the output, this is the input, and now we know that the state change can happen only at the leading edge. Now here this leading edge is already gone. Okay, so it means that output, it was there, and at that point in time input was this, so output remains the same here. Now at this point in time it will sample the input, which is 0. So then the output of register will change. Is it clear? So this is the desired behavior. Okay, so I'm repeating. Okay, let's assume that at this point, okay, register input is something, right? It's something. So output remains the same, whatever is there in the previous state, like here. Now output of register changes only when, so the state will change only at the rising edge. So here the value is 1. And at this point in time, the register output will change and will remain stable. And then note that the register input is 1 at all these edges. Okay, so output remains 1. Only at this point in time, it will the register input is 0, so output of the register becomes 0. So this is the desirable behavior. However, there is a problem. And this is typical latches problem that, okay. So if we are not using edge triggered method, and if you are using level triggered method, then what we see is that whenever there is a glitch, the output also changes. So that gives the logic that we cannot use latch in processor design. Okay. So because here we are triggering based on the level, not based on the edge. Okay. So latches are level triggered. So whenever input changes, the output also changes, right? So we don't want these undesirable behavior, right? Because here also you see the output changes while at this level, right? Because it senses only level. All right. So ideally, state change should have happened here. Okay. So all these are not really desirables. Hence, what we do is that we move to D type of flip-flop. All right. So and then it's very simple, right? It's edge triggered. Okay. So D output is observable at Q only at the beginning of the clock cycle, and available throughout the clock cycle. So it's very simple. So we come to the new storage element, which is now D type of flip-flop. And the condition is that we need to read the current state. Okay. We need a storage element that allows to read the current state throughout the current clock cycle and not write the next state values into storage until the beginning of next clock cycle. All right, this is very simple that we have discussed, right? So now we come to design of D-type flip-flop where state changes only at the clock edge and data is available for the full cycle. And it's something like this. We have now master and we have now slave. Okay. And all right. So data at here, okay, let's assume that changes are happening at the clock edge. Okay. So whatever is data available from combinational logic circuit will be input to this one, and it will move from master to slave before this leading edge happens or rising edge happens. And the rising edge, that state changes. Okay. So I'm sure you would have done this in your course. So I will not go into detail. However, I would expect you to learn this from the book. Okay. All right. So we can use these flip-flops to implement state register. All right, because we have solved this problem of glitches and so on, so forth. So we can define now a D-type flip-flop as follows. Okay, so we have clock, we have D-type input and two outputs Q and Q bar, which are Q and Q bar are opposite of each other. Okay. The flip-flop samples D on the rising edge or positive edge when clock changes from 0 to 1, and D passes through to Q. Okay. Otherwise, Q holds its previous value. So these are very simple, extremely simple. So not going to go into details. We can look at. So basically, whatever is the value of D that changes at the rising edge of the clock, okay, and remains there. The output Q will. So suppose this is 1. Okay, input is 1. Then at leading edge it changes. The state changes corresponding to 1, and then the output will remain. So this output, the output remain 1 till the next leading edge. Okay, and after that, again the state change may happen. All right. Okay. Right, but when we actually implement this, we can see there is some delay. Okay. Okay, output is available only after some time. Okay, we'll look at these delays in the next class, maybe after 2 classes, and we'll design the circuit. Okay, are you?
Yes, sir, it's okay.
Because see, I don't want to spend too much time on to something that you have done. Yet it is important because when we design data paths, some of these concepts will be relevant. Okay. All right. Now from the D-type flip-flop. Now D-type flip-flop, of course, one D-type flip-flop can store only 1 bit. Okay. So we can create a register out of these flip-flops by putting them in parallel. So like this, here we have 4 flip-flops, D-type flip-flops. So we can create a register with which can store 4 bits. Obviously, it will have input corresponding to these 4 flip-flops. So we input size of 4, output size is also 4, corresponding to 4 flip-flops inside. Okay, all right. All right. So this is internal design of 4-bit D-type flip-flop. Okay, I mean using master slave configuration. So this is one D-type flip-flop. This is second D-type flip-flop. And if you put them in a box, then what you will see is actually 4 inputs and 4 outputs here. Okay, and of course there is a clock to the whole thing. All right, so simple. All right, so I try to finish it very fast, so we have some time available for discussion on the test. Okay, the processor design requires design of finite state machine. Finite state machine consists of sequential logic circuits that can store state of the system. Okay, and we have briefly looked at all this: RS latch, gated delatch, use of clock. Okay, and finally we came to the concept of D-type flip-flop, and we put these D-type flip-flops in parallel to create registers. Okay, and register is a very important part of processor design. Okay, because it can store the states, and also not only it's used for storing temporary data, but also the registers are all used for as a counter, like for example program counter or instruction register, and many other places. All right, that's all about today. I know I have rushed very fast, and I've done so because it's just a revision for you. Okay. Any question? Okay. So basically, we will have to, some takeaway from this is that all our processor design will happen based on clocks. Okay. Okay. In the beginning, we will take a design where one instruction will be executed within a cycle. Now remember that in one instruction, what all we have to do? We looked at all the stages. You have instruction fetch, instruction decode, then execute. Okay. Bring operands or fetch operands, execute, and store. Okay. First, bring the instruction from memory, then decode it and get the semantics out of it and generate corresponding control signals. Okay. Bring the operands if they are not available, maybe from memory. Okay. Or if it's immediate kind of instruction, then bring that immediate part into register and then execute. For example, add B plus C, etc. And if the storage is the results are to be stored, okay, into the memory, then store it. So all these, 5 stages of an instruction execution or phases of instruction execution has to happen within this period. This is how we are going to design the data path. Okay, and that's the reason we have given this concept of leading edge, because now once state transition has happened, next state logic has this much of time. Okay, so it means that all combination circuits must work within that, and no state change can happen within this period, right? Between this after first leading edge until you get next leading edge, you cannot do any state transition of any other element. Okay, based on this principle, we are going to design the data path, and hence I thought it's very relevant to give the concept of clock and concept of rising edge of the clock and the delay that combination circuit may experience, to execute any logic. All right, any question?